Welcome to the Last in Line podcast, where we discuss faith, hope, and truth in the lives of amazing servant leaders. You are in the right place if you crave purpose and if you hunger for a life of significance. This podcast applies biblical truth to our daily lives, and we pray that you walk away encouraged and inspired. This is the Last in Line podcast.
Hey, we're honored to bring you some good news. Recent development in our sponsorship programs. We are now partnering with Christ Coffee, who is an online business that is working to save children from sex trafficking, and they are spreading the gospel throughout the world. Christ Coffee is more than just a brand. It is a movement where each cup is a testament to their commitment to high quality beans, the spread of the gospel, and making a tangible impact in the community and around the world. For those of you that don't know, which I know all of you do, trafficking of any kind, of kids, adults, men, women, is a major epidemic. More than 1 million children are being exploited, and you can actually make a dent in that in a good way, and help take a part in setting some of those kids free when you shop at Christ Coffee. 10% of every sale is donated to the rescue of children and the spread of the gospel. Their mission, guys, we can partner with that. And each cup you brew actually does go to saving a child. So they're actually blessing us and our customers, our listeners, with a discount. So type in Last in Line and you'll get 10% off of your first order. And it is quality premium coffee beans. Gentlemen, the dark roast is some of the best I've ever had. So don't wait. Go to Christ Coffee, order your first bag, use Last in Line for 10% off that first order, and I guarantee you'll keep coming back. Brew a cup, rescue a child with Christ Coffee. Gentlemen, I gotta tell you, I like me some pie. And one of the reasons I'm looking forward to the holiday season is because I like the desserts, and specifically apple and chocolate pie. I'm not too fond of the humble variety, but what I'm going to talk to you about today involves me having an extra helping of humble pie a few days back. Last week, I had the honor of participating in a prison ministry and visiting one of the larger state penitentiaries in Texas, maximum security, in Huntsville, Texas. And if you've ever driven to Houston from Dallas on I-45 and you get to Huntsville, just north of there, you look off to your right and see the kind of daunting structure that is the barbed wire, that is the watchtowers and cinder block buildings of our correctional facility here, one of many that we have in Texas. In fact, that particular city has about 5 or 6 locations, which that in and of itself is a sad situation, that we're at a place where we're overcrowded and outgrowing these structures in order to, and in need of building multiple in the same zip code. So anyway, I know they got to divide different offenses, different levels of security, and having different locations. But this was a exhilaratingly glorious experience, at the same time a devastatingly sad experience to me. I've never been a part of a prison ministry. So for those of you, which would probably assume all of you have, since I'm always late to the party, pretty much any party, I would probably guess you've done the prison ministry at least once. So I won't bore you with all the logistical factors of getting there, getting through security, but in that time that it takes, and let me tell you, you don't just walk up and flash your ID and walk in. I mean, there's levels, right? There's gates, there's little holding tanks, there's more gates, there's waiting for certain personnel to check you in and out, to verify your identity, to walk you in hallways. You can't have more than 10 or so people in a specific room between entrances and gates. And when they close shut, it's a loud metal on metal, steel on steel, bone chilling kind of sound because of where you are. You start to take all of it in, and you start to really understand the context and the severity of the situation and the magnitude of your role there, but also the magnitude of the level of people that you're going to interact with. And when I say level of people, I don't mean to segment people, but the type of people in based on choices and decisions they've made and offenses they've committed and crimes they've been guilty of and charged with, based on that, they're a different group of people than you and I. And they don't wake up or go to bed the same as we do. Now, all that to say, once I tried to take in the environment and not be too overwhelmed or intimidated because of, I mean, and this is ironic because I'm in the middle of watching the series Prison Break. I think I told you this a while back, and I'm always, again, last to do anything. This was an old series. I don't know when it was, maybe early 2000s, mid 2000s, but I'm sure all of you've seen it. But I started watching this a few months ago, and it's, of course, it's scintillating, it's addicting. I'm binging it pretty much. Now, based on that, I have this level of expectation when I walk in, and of course, it meets all of my expectations, and I'm just kind of like a kid in a not so candy store, right? I'm wide-eyed and not so bushy-tailed, but I'm like really understanding where I am. It's starting to sit in and sink in, okay? But again, I'm doing God's work, right? All good and all, worthy and serving and just trying to be there to support these people that are going to a church service in prison. So look, I've said all that to say we get in, and from the minute we get there, you just start kind of walking around, working the room, shaking hands, talking to guys. I don't know these people. They don't know me, nor do they care, really. So I thought you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, at the level of joy and gratitude that they have for us being there. And granted, they get a church every Saturday. A different church comes and serves them and ministers to them. This particular church I was going with isn't my home church, but a friend of mine invited me several other times too. And I've had scheduling conflicts. And this one time I was able to go. And I really thought about maybe not going at one point because I wasn't sure what to expect, or it's a whole Saturday. Of course, what kind of thinking is that, right? How selfish can a person get? And I'll save the beating that I'm going to give myself for later, because that's what the entire episode is going to be about. Is you and I have a lot to think about, and specifically, I'll talk about me. But I'm going to take a verbal lashing from myself today, and maybe if the shoe fits, maybe you're wearing it too. So these guys are welcoming, smiling, hugging us, shaking our hands, inviting us to sit in the crowd with them, which we all did. And man, what a time. What a time of prayer, what a time of music and worship, what a time of preaching and ministering to each other and praying for these guys one-on-one after the service. And just what a time of fellowshipping with like-minded other believers, men that I went with from this other church that I didn't know before. I got to meet them and engage in this type of ministry. And once you get shoulder to shoulder with somebody in this capacity, it changes a lot about your relationship. I mean, when you go to eat afterwards, you're sitting at a huge table with strangers that you've known for all of about 2 or 3 hours. But it feels like they've been your friends your whole life because of what you just did with them, what just transpired, and how you just served the body of Christ. That may be a little bit of a segment that looks different than what we're accustomed to, but you still, nonetheless, served the kingdom together with these guys. So it just kind of created this little bond, at least for the afternoon of one day out of the year. And I plan to go back. Trust me, I will be back. But what I want to talk to you about and what I'm going to call this episode is, you might have already guessed it. No excuses. 5 lessons learned from prison inmates. Now, they didn't technically directly teach me anything, right? They didn't really show me something necessarily that I didn't already know conceptually. What they did give me is some color and context around what these concepts I already knew should look like, what the design of them were for by the creator, what the blueprint originally looked like when God drew this thing up. These guys, these inmates who have every excuse to be angry and hateful and resentful, and every excuse to turn away from God and to rebel and sink into an agnostic role of religion and viewpoint of Christianity, did the opposite. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. But first, let me give you an idea why this kind of hit me. Because if you're like me, and I know that you are, when you leave an experience like that, man, the wheels are turning, the reflection starts. You start reflecting on your past and your upbringing and your adult life and some of the choices you made or didn't make, and some of the crimes you did or didn't commit, and some of the sin and choices that plagued your past before you became a believer. But I'll speak for me, not you. So if you never did that, indulge me for a second, because it got me thinking, literally. I rode up there with a guy, so we talked a lot, but I also had some time to think because I wasn't concentrating on directions or traffic or the road and driving. So kind of glance, as you gaze out the window, your wheels are turning, or mine were. And I start thinking, look, before 2004, February of 2024, I'm sorry, 2004. Before that, that was the day I got saved. Before that, it was a lot of years of not saved. And when I say not saved, was everything antithetical to the Christian life. So I was really thinking about some of those things that I used to partake in, and lifestyle, and acquaintances, relationships, friend groups, just influences, man, and language, just different sins that I used to have, way I used to talk, way I used to act, way I used to think about the world. And it didn't shed a really favorable light on myself. And so I know we aren't called to live in regret or shame or guilt or those things, but it gets you thinking about it, because then you're more likely to A, not repeat it, and B, have a better perspective of where you are now, and not take it for granted. So again, hopefully don't steal my thunder like I do every week, but my former life I got to thinking about. In college, my second year, of course, every year in college was about drinking and chasing girls. Very little about school, if any. Very much about social. And that was before social media and smartphones and that kind of stuff. And barely did we even have cell phones. I think they were those big, clunky, bricks, cinder block phones with the antennas that look like you know, a piece of chalk, big fat chalk, street chalk. So spring of, I want to say 91, spring of 92, sorry. Spring of 92. I again, every that weekend was unlike any other weekend. Actually, to say that it was just like every other weekend, sorry, it was exactly like every other weekend of excess alcohol consumption. I decided to get behind the wheel and drive. Okay, and I get pulled over, and long story short, I get taken to jail and get a DUI. Now, I guess they call them DWIs in Texas and the South. They were DUIs there in Oklahoma. Um, so there was a no doubter. I was handcuffed. I was gone. Side note, interesting fun fact, although not so fun, putting the car in park, I mistakenly put it in reverse and backed up into the police car. That probably did it. As if the breathalyzer and my breath and my actions weren't enough. I was driving left of center. He was the oncoming traffic, so he had to swerve to miss me. So it was a done deal. I was done. But I started thinking like, bro, I was one, I don't know, foot, maybe 1 mile away from being one of the inmates, maybe not necessarily at this location, but being in that uh, situation of wearing state white jumpsuit. You know, I was I was one literally swerve away from either hitting somebody, killing myself, injuring somebody or somebody's property. It was that close. Like, I don't know what would have happened had I hit the cop car, like as he's coming at me. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation most likely. Um, I spent the night in jail. Obviously, I had to call my dad. Worst phone call I've ever had to make. Um, and I'll be honest, I didn't know what my future was going to look like. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. No damage was done. So fortunately, now this takes me to a place of privilege and entitlement that I can't help but ignore. But my dad knew the judge for that particular county I was in, and I got basically let out the next day, had to pay $200, got my license back, never had it suspended, was on like a 90-day probationary period. That doesn't happen to most people. Like, who knows what would have happened if it would have been some other place, another time with somebody else involved in the decisions, and what could have happened to me? I don't know the law that well. Probably not going to a maximum security prison, but probably wouldn't have been pretty. Um, so it got me thinking, look, I grew up with a pretty privileged upbringing. Two parents in the home, both of them working, you know, never wanted really for anything. I had everything I needed. Only child, of course. Never went hungry, never went without clothes. I mean, lives are just so different. Like, that's what I start thinking about. My life could have been so different growing up. Like, why did I get so blessed? Why was I so lucky in so many things? I mean, the friends I ran around, we did some stupid stuff. I broke several laws growing up. And that, what about the guy that I was sitting next to in the prison this weekend? And he maybe he commits one or two little misdemeanors and then that one felony. Like, maybe he was one step away from being free from any charges, just like I got let go and free from that. But instead his life took another turn because he took a turn with, I don't know his upbringing, but let's assume he had some negative influences, or maybe he didn't have both parents in the home. Maybe they didn't have enough money. Maybe he had to go out and steal to feed his family. I don't know. I do know the guy next to me told me that he shot a guy and told God that if God let this guy live, he would give his life to Christ and serve him the rest of his life, which he's doing. The guy lived, but he's in prison, this guy next to me. But he knew more of the Bible than I did. He was on fire during worship more than I ever thought I was. He was just had a joy and a peace about him and a certainty of what his calling was now to serve God's kingdom. But he's still locked up. But one of the freer people I've ever seen spiritually. To be a prisoner there physically, but to be as free as anybody I've ever seen spiritually, that was a breath of fresh air for me. But guys, I just couldn't help but think, and I still, obviously I'm talking to you, I still can't help but think about how my life could have gone a different direction. I could have been a part of a major crime that landed me in a maximum security prison that maybe I'm still in there. Maybe I'm still serving time for. Don't know. So I can't, I don't know how to reconcile, and I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm just going to be grateful. But I will say for you, maybe it's time you think about some of those things and ask yourself some questions about, why was I protected when somebody else wasn't? Why was I lucky and the ball bounced my way when it didn't bounce the way of someone else? Why didn't I have to suffer dire consequences for my actions like many of I would say these inmates did? Yeah, they made bad choices. Yeah, they knew what they were doing, most of them. I don't know. If you're under the influence, maybe you don't know. I mean, I could have very easily been drunk one weekend and decided to get in a fight and kill someone. Like, I wasn't intentionally trying to murder somebody, but in my drunkenness, not thinking clearly, it happened. So then I have to pay for that. Some of these guys in the same way. But this place was full. I mean, there must have been 250 inmates, and there were 15 of us. And they had an assembled choir, an assembled band. One of our guys was playing guitar and singing as well. One of our guys preached a message, but they had a couple other dudes that were up there preaching before the actual message. And golly, it was a very humbling experience, but a very exhilarating experience. But those are questions you might want to ask, why your life, we hear about survivor's guilt, right, all the time. And why in my situation, there were several times, guys, and I know you can relate. I've heard many of you when we've talked before, say, man, I'm lucky to be alive. Man, I shouldn't be alive. Man, I don't know how I'm alive. Like, those are things I've said. I don't really have survivor's guilt, but I have survivor's contemplation and recollection and reflection of, wow, God really must have either had a plan. Obviously he did. He does for every one of his kids, but I must have really, won the lottery when it comes to just coming out on the right side of these things. I mean, 50-50, the coin flips. I'm not always the guy that's going to win those, but I sure did when it came to situations in my life that it could have gone bad or good. It could have been sparing my life or taking my life. It could have been me having irreversible damage on someone else, or somehow getting past it unscathed or not harming anyone. So why? I mean, I don't know how to reconcile it other than to know, don't question God. God's plan's real. God knew these guys were going to be in prison and I wasn't. He knew long before any of this happened that it was going to happen, and he's using it. Nothing is ever wasted. No experience, no harm, no pain is ever wasted. Those guys, I mean, if you walked in that room, you're like, this is what worship should look like. This is what loving Jesus should look like. How dare I? And you just fill in the blank, right? And I'm about to fill in the blank with about 10 different things here of how dare you and how dare I. That's really what got me thinking about talking to you today about no excuses, guys. How dare we ever make an excuse, ever have a complaint, really, about, yeah, I'm going to complain if I spill coffee on my brand new shirt. That's different. How dare we ever view our lives as a pity party, or what we haven't been given, or it's not fair that someone else blank and we didn't blank. How dare we is what I want to, maybe that's what I should call the episode. But I'm going to call it no excuses, because now I have no excuse. Like, not that I did before, and I'll catch myself. That's one area I'm pretty decent at, is being real honest and real blunt with myself, and sometimes a little harder on myself than I should be, or that anyone else ever could be. But in this situation, I deserve what I'm about to take myself through right here, and maybe you do too. And who am I to take you through it? But you have every opportunity to turn me off and turn to a different podcast, mute my voice, whatever, if you don't think that I have a right. But I'm speaking into your life with encouragement and love, just like I am mine, because I feel like God has something to say. It wasn't a fluke that I attended that service in a penitentiary when I had every opportunity to bail out on it, probably. And then I had every other opportunity in the past that never got to transpire because of my schedule. But now my schedule had no excuse. My schedule was no excuse. And now I'm all in for any time they'll have me. So here it is. I'm going to fill in the blank for you, but you can do it on your own too. How dare you? And I'm speaking to me, and I'm speaking to you. How dare you ever take freedom for granted? Again, the fact that I can sit here when I want, how I want, dressed how I want, the freedom to walk out in my front yard and walk down the street when I feel like it. How dare I ever take that for granted again? These prisoners, man, they get 2 hours on a Saturday to go worship Jesus. That's free time for them. They could be doing anything else. Most likely, I don't know, maybe not anything, but you get it. And then I walk out of there and I look down hallways, and there's just, these hallways are barely wide enough for people to fit through. And those guys have to walk down those hallways to their home that is a 9x9 cell. I don't know what they are, but probably 150-pound steel door clang shut, slam shut to their home every day. I can walk out my front door right now, shut it how I want to shut it, when I want to shut it. I can leave it open all night if I want. I can get up in the middle of the night and have a snack if I feel like. Like, I think that horse got beaten past being dead. But that's the first one. Number two, how dare you ever think your problem is unique? You're the only one going through something. You're the first person to ever experience this trial or this pain or this hardship in life. I've thought that. I know practically that's not true, but I've talked myself into thinking, God, right now I've got it worse than anybody else in this very moment. Don't lie, you have too. But how dare we? How dare we ever think a problem that we have is unique? Number three, how dare we ever view worship as an obligation? And when I say worship, I'm in the context of music and singing and praising the Lord and rejoicing out loud. Make a joyful noise to the Lord. There's other forms of worship, of course. And if you want to lump those into this, you can. How dare we ever take prayer for granted? How dare we ever take communion for granted? How dare we ever take fellowship with other believers for granted? How dare any of this worship? How dare you ever roll your eyes? And I'm talking to me because I've done it. I probably did it last weekend. How dare you ever roll your eyes when a particular singer on stage at your church who doesn't have the best voice is singing a song that you like, and you're like, oh, why do they have to sing that? Why are they ruining my song? Like, literally, that's what we think. How dare we? How dare we judge, first of all, that person pouring their heart out to the Lord? But how dare we ever minimize? I'm good for one butchering of a word every week. At least one. I'm good for speaking. I'm good for mispronouncing. I'm good for misusing a word, at least one. Okay. Anyway, how dare we minimize the act of worship? Because when I watched, and I'm gonna tell you, I got so caught up in that worship Saturday. I mean, I wasn't taking anything for granted. I was soaking that up. I was in the present. The Lord had filled up that place, and those people in that room were on fire. Everything they had was overflowing to the Lord. They were putting everything on the line at the Lord's feet in those moments of worship. How dare you and I ever view worship as an obligation just to so we can check that box of being super spiritual? How dare, number 4, you ever frown in the presence of God? That goes back to when you walk in your sanctuary at church, or when you walk into your small group, or when you go have coffee with a buddy. How dare you ever dread it? How dare you ever frown when you're in the presence of that ministry? How dare you ever look down upon those opportunities to serve or be in the presence of serving? How dare you ever walk in and see somebody sitting in the seat you always sit in every week and get mad, and that wastes you for the rest of the service. You're thinking, you're disgruntled, you're grumpy, you're pissed the rest of that service because someone was in your seat. How dare you ever? Those guys in that prison chapel would sit on the floor if they knew they could go be in a church building somewhere as a free person. They would sit in the broom closet to hear worship and hear the word. So the next one, how dare you ever judge someone else's sin? Man, how dare we ever have a hierarchy of sin? Yeah, I get that there are degrees of sin, but how dare we ever say, oh man, wow, can't believe that guy did that. Yeah, I've done this, but I can't believe that guy did that. Like, who is that guy? I think how dare we ever be holier than thou? I've done all these things, by the way. I know you know that. I'm preaching to the choir. I'm probably preaching to the mirror more than anything. How dare we ever do that? How dare I ever look down on someone else's sin as if I would never do that? I would never fill in the blank. The minute you start doing that, God will deal with you. I don't know how, but God is no respecter of persons. He doesn't think that because I went to a prison ministry to serve on Saturday that I'm justified in doing any of this that I'm talking to you about the following week or ever. Oh, well, Shibley prayed for about 5 or 6 prisoners. So the fact that he's, judging his boss for X conversation or judging his coworkers because they have inflated egos, like, hey, yeah, he's okay. He gets a pass. Give him a mulligan. That's not how it works. God, if I could punch myself in the face, I'd do it right now. No, not really. But how dare we ever do that? But how dare we also ever condemn someone's past? And I got a caveat that's just hit me. How dare you ever condemn yourself for your past when you've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony? You have been clean. God has cleansed you. You have confessed your sin. He's faithful and just to forgive you and cleanse you of all unrighteousness. He nailed your sin to the cross. How dare you ever judge someone else or your sin, your past, or condemn you or anyone else because of their past? Jesus asked the woman at the well, or I'm sorry, not the woman, the prostitute, who among your condemner, who condemns you? And no one was there, neither do I. He said, go and sin no more. So who are we to condemn anybody, including ourselves? Next one, how dare you ever think you're too good to go to prison? That's a no-brainer comment. You look at people, inmates, like if you're like me, you see the bus on the side of the road and the inmates are out cleaning up trash, right? And you're looking, you're like, that'll never be me. Really? You going to make that statement? I mean, I joke with my family all the time when we start, I don't really believe in jinxing anything. We don't have that kind of power, obviously, but we always say, don't jinx it. We're always like, don't talk about the no-hitter in the middle of the game kind of thing. And don't say that out loud. Don't make declarative vows about yourself or what you will or won't do or who you are or are not. Don't ever think you're too good to go to prison. I'll leave it at that. Couple more here. How dare you ever think that the cell at a prison and a jumpsuit, the white jumpsuit that those prisoners are wearing, wasn't almost fitted to your size? Don't ever think that you couldn't have been the guy in there. In fact, we all should be. We all, technically, in a spiritual sense, are convicted of a crime, are criminals, are prisoners until Jesus said, here you go, I pardon these people. They're my people. I'll lay down my life. They are now pardoned for their crime. We got let off the hook, gentlemen. Simple as that. That's the gospel. We were deserving of hell and prison, but he paid the cost with the cross and the blood. So how dare you ever think that the cell life and the prison state white's jumpsuit life couldn't be yours. It wasn't almost yours. Maybe it was almost yours. Ever look down? How dare you ever look down? The next one, on the poor and the homeless. Now, I don't think many of us do that. When I say look down, like maybe we look on them in compassion. Maybe the old us looked on them as at pit, in a pit with pity. Nah, pity goes hand in hand pretty closely with shame and, casting that shame on those people. We don't know their story. We don't know what happened. They could have been just like the guy I was sitting next to who's on fire for Jesus, gets let out, on probation, gets paroled, has nowhere to go. Nobody loves them. Nobody gives them another chance. They're on the street. That could have been that guy. So how dare we ever look down on the homeless or the poor? I say we reach out. I say we figure out ways to serve them. I say we pray for them at the very least. But driving by them, I know you guys live in areas probably where you see a homeless person occasionally. Man, offer them something. Offer them prayer at the very least. Offer them, if you got any money or whatever it is, I don't know. But don't ever look down on those folks. We do not know their story, and we don't know how or when that could ever be us. Maybe you don't know. So the other one here I had was last couple here, guys. How dare we ever think God prioritizes his love for the spotless and the successful, right? Only. He's got this cream on the top that's for you and I because we're spotless and significant and we're successful, right? We're the trophy child in our mind. But these other little kind of lowly, poor, downtrodden, homeless, whatever, prisoners, inmates, God's got a different kind of love for them than he does for us. Like he's not showing them off. He likes to show us off. Give me a break. I mean, I don't think I ever thought that, but if I ever thought that way, man, slap myself. He doesn't have any prioritized love. We're all children of God. He created all this and all of us. I have 4 kids. You think go through and pick one and say, okay, you're going with me. I'm going to go talk to a group of guys and tell them I got kids and you're the prize possession. And, all of them are just like you, but I chose you to bring and show off. Absolutely not. Are you kidding me? He doesn't consider us spotless, number one, and nor should we consider ourselves. Success is relative. I know many people who are successful but are prisoners in their mind. Their spirit is dead. Their soul is lost. But they're successful on paper, right? Where are they going to go? There are a lot more of those inmates in prison going to go to heaven than some of the more successful people with large bank accounts and all the toys that I know that are out here in the free world. I guarantee I'll see a lot more of those prisoners than some of those other people that are out in the world making it all about them and denying Christ and thinking that they're all self-made and that toys and riches and things are worth chasing over any sort of spiritual nourishment and life. So the last one is, how dare you ever think you're arrived, that you've arrived? How dare I ever think that I'm a finished product? How dare I ever think that I am as righteous and as spiritual as I'm going to get? How dare I ever think that I've done as much good as I'm ever going to do for the kingdom? How dare you think that you've already arrived ever? I don't know that many of you listening think that, but I'm here to caution all of us. If you've ever had a split second of a notion of any of these, I'm hoping that this quickens your spirit. I'm hoping this challenges your brain enough to catch yourself, repent of those thoughts, ask for forgiveness from the Father, get in prayer and get humbled real quick. Like I said, I love pie, but I'm not big on the humble part. And the humble pie, I took a real big helping of it this weekend. And I'm grateful. I really am grateful because I see things differently. I'm chasing after Jesus differently. I'm absorbing God's word differently. I'm digging into the gospels differently. I'm just pouring into myself as much about Jesus as I can and hopes that as much as possible comes out. I want to be more like him and less like me every single minute of every single day. I want to love him more and hunger for him more and chase after him more every single day throughout the day. And I hope that's what this did for you, because it did it for me. This experience of this prison ministry that I was a part of Saturday was a game changer. And I knew it would be. My buddy told me, he's like, it'll change your life. And I was like, oh, okay. That sounds kind of cliche. I don't know. I mean, will it change my life? Absolutely. So guys, I'm looking through a different lens when it comes to worshiping the Lord, when it comes to looking at other people and stages of life they're in, walks of life they're in. I'm looking at lost people with a lot more compassion. I'm looking at forgiveness and compassion a whole lot different. Guys, we can be tough. We can be rugged. We can be lions and still have that compassionate meekness about us, that tenderness about us that loves people. Bible says we want to love what God loves, hate what God hates. And I can tell you these few things that I said, how dare you on, that I've had little moments in my spirit rise up, and God hates those things. So I'm going to do everything in my power to seek him to quicken me in those moments where I don't repeat that anymore. Gentlemen, I love you. Thank you for being here every single week. I hope this blessed y'all. I hope it changed the way you think. I hope it challenged you. And I hope it did what it did for me. And I hope it was life-changing, guys. With that, be blessed.